All right. Hello and welcome back, everyone. Let's get started the new talk in cognitivity neuroscience by Dr. Seyed-Mahdi Khaligh-Razavi. Dr. Khaligh-Razavi is a neuroscientist and entrepreneur, co-founder of Cognitivity Ltd in UK, and assistant professor at Royal Institute. Brain and Cognitive Science Department. With a background in computer science and machine learning, he completed his PhD in 2014 at the MRC Cognition and Brain Science unit of Cambridge University, in which he was studying visual object recognition in human and machine. After that, he became a postdoctoral researcher at Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. He started studying the human brain using multimodal neuroimaging techniques and computational modeling. During this time, he was also affiliated with Harvard Catalyst, where he has worked on medical device development. That was a short introduction about Dr. Khaligh-Razavi. So I invite him to start his presentation if he's present. Otherwise, we play a pre-recorded presentation till Dr. Razavi joins us.
All right. So today we're going to talk about the AI and cognitive health. I'll start by talking about the AI in digital, in healthcare in general, and then we move on to some further details and at least two examples of AI being used in cognitive health. So let's start. This kind of summarizes where the AI is currently in healthcare in comparison to other industries. So here, for example, we can see that the Industry 4.0 that some of you might be familiar with, which is referring to the use of artificial intelligence, IoT, and the new emerging technologies in the industry. You can see that the medical sciences or medicine or healthcare practices are slightly behind in comparison to other industries. And that has to do with a few different reasons. Well, that's partly due to regulations, because the healthcare is largely more regulated compared to other industries. You're dealing with the humans, their health, and that adds a little bit of a barrier to entry. Now, on top of that, you have to work harder to adopt your technology into these new systems. And that's perhaps another reason that the healthcare is behind in adopting these new technologies. All right, so to give you a little bit of an idea, I've categorized here the applications of AI in healthcare into four subsections, or into four categories, if you like. Now, AI can be used to improve the infrastructure and reduce administration costs, or improve the administration processes. And I'll give you an example here. You might have seen Babylon Health, which is a platform mainly used in the UK, and now is trying to expand into other countries as well. So Babylon Health has this title GP at hand, meaning that the general practitioner at hand, your primary care physician, is essentially with you in your smartphone. And how would that work? It was not that difficult. In the UK health system, as an example, when you want to see your primary care physician, you have to call the center you're registered with and book an appointment. That typically might take about 1, 2, or 3 weeks. So that's kind of the queue. Now, what Babylon does in its core is to connect you with your physician in less than 24 hours through your smartphone. You have a profile and you can get health checkups remotely. You can book an appointment and visit your primary care physician remotely. And then you can also track the prescriptions you have been received in your profile. You can see your clinical records and you have essential access to all those information. Now, that does reduce the costs for both the patient and the primary care center. And it does increase the quality because you get the same quality of care with essentially spending less time being wasted in the queue, and you get it faster. If imagine that you well, there is an issue that you need to see your primary care physician faster rather than in a week or 2 weeks. That's essential taken care of here. It's more accessible and it's more affordable. You can extend this into other scenarios to improve the infrastructure in healthcare and the administration processes. So this first category, compared to the 3 other categories that I'm going to get to, has the advantage of being more agile. So this category, because it doesn't directly relate to the patient's health, it doesn't directly relate to the treatment or to the prescriptions. It's not regulated in that sense. So it's not like a medical device or something like that for which you have to go through a regulatory process. And it's easier to integrate into the healthcare system. I would, if you want to choose one to essentially get your hands dirty with using AI in healthcare, you might want to choose the first one, which is in a sense easier to integrate into the healthcare system and can be faster. Well, the second one is if you're using AI in prevention. For example, there are applications or devices that help you either be in charge of your lifestyle, take control of your lifestyle, improve your lifestyle in order to prevent some of the future disorders, given the the disorders that increase with age, the risk increases with age, or other type of disorders which might be chronic illnesses. And I'll give you an example towards the second part of the talk, and that is the OptiMind, which I'll talk about more towards the end. Right, now the number 3, or the third category where AI can be used, or this digital technology can be used, is in diagnostics. So either as a diagnostic tool or as an aid for diagnosis. And here I'll give you the example of the platform we have developed, the Integrated Cognitive Assessment, or IC for short, which is an aid for diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, and it's a medical device essentially, or software is medical device. So in diagnosis, AI has been, I would say, it's perhaps the largest area AI has been used or trialed in diagnosis, and it does make sense because diagnosis, in a sense, is it's kind of a classification problem. And well, most of the AI deals with classifications, so it's kind of easy to come up with diagnosis solutions, or ideas at least, if not the full solution. So that's maybe one of the reasons there has been more attention paid to the diagnosis than to the other categories. And finally, we have treatment, and category 4, and this also falls under the digital therapeutics, which is a new concept, relatively new concept. And well, in treatment, things we have include cognitive training as an example. Maybe one new example I can give you is a company called Akili in Boston. And this company has recently got the FDA approval for a video game they have developed, which is responsible to take care of or treat ADHD in children. So that's one of the new areas in the digital therapeutics. Okay, so as we move on, I'll give you 2 examples. One is the case study of Cognitivity's ICA test to defeat dementia, Alzheimer's disease in particular. And then I'll give you the example of Optimind, which is another platform we've developed in prevention, which essentially helps you to take control of your lifestyle in order to improve your cognitive health. Right, so in the first example, to give you an idea about the prevalences of Alzheimer's cases worldwide, every 3 seconds, someone in the world develops dementia. And you would be surprised to know that the memory symptoms that you see are actually not the first symptoms or the first changes in the behavior or in the brain that starts with the disease. And indeed, the underlying pathology of the disease starts about 20 or more years before the onset of the memory symptoms. So there is a gap here. There is a gap in diagnosis, and that gap is as huge as 20 years. So to put it into perspective, there are 47 million worldwide who have dementia or Alzheimer's disease. This is for 2018. The numbers have been updated, but this is the slightly older. Now, going back to this concept of the underlying pathology of the disease that starts at least 20 years earlier than the onset of memory symptoms. One thing I wanted to mention here is the important fact that although there are no disease-modifying therapies as of now for treating mild cognitive impairment, which is one stage before Alzheimer's disease. People might argue that given, well, because there is no treatment, no pharmaceutical treatments, well, then there is no reason to detect the disease earlier. That's kind of an argument you might have heard or might hear, or it might actually be your question, given that there is no treatment to start with. Why does it matter that we diagnose the disease earlier? Well, I'm gonna tell you that all the preventions, all the I would call it non-pharmaceutical interventions you can have. And actually all the trials currently that is under progress in different, within different drug companies. These are all going to be effective only if the disease is diagnosed early enough. Because the process of the disorder is irreversible. It's a neurodegenerative disorder. The neurons die, and you don't have any way to bring them back. As simple as that. And the earlier you slow down this process or stop this process, the better. So that's kind of very clear, I think. And of course, for any disorder, the first step is diagnosis, and if you have no way to diagnose the disease on time, you won't have the chance to come up with a treatment. That kind of argues why it is important to be able to diagnose the disease slightly earlier, if not 20 years, but at least when people start to have this mild kind of impairments. So you can start the non-pharmaceutical interventions at least. And in few years, or in a year or so, we might also have disease-modifying therapies for MCI. So things are changing essentially. Right. Going to the platform itself, I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the integrated cognitive assessment platform and how it works, and how it helps in terms of both saving costs and saving lives. So the platform, as I briefly mentioned at the beginning, it's using an AI engine which looks at the data already collected from people with mild cognitive impairment or mild Alzheimer's disease, and then gives back to the clinician an indication of whether this person have cognitive impairment. Right, so the test itself is a visual test, is a rapid visual categorization test. Participants or patients see a series of natural images that are carefully selected to vary in terms of difficulties and statistical properties. And then these images are represented on retina. People watch the images. They're presented in a rapid order, each of them shown for 100 milliseconds. And they go up the hierarchy of visual cortex, and they reach the higher level visual areas where a perception of the image is shaped, and by then you know if there is an animal in the image or not. It's a binary categorization, animal versus non-animal. And this, in young healthy individuals, it takes about 100 to 150 milliseconds to process. And we've shown in an EEG study that in older individuals with MCI, it takes longer than older individuals who are healthy. So the speed of processing this animus information is delayed in people with mild cognitive impairment. And that's one of the things the test captures. Right, so after the images are perceived, they have to be translated into a motor action, so that the motor cortex deals with that. And then they have to tap on the left or right of the iPad. And then finally, the demographic information of these participants plus their data of the ICA test, which includes the reaction times, accuracies, per image or per subcategory of images, and a few other information. They are sent to the AI engine, and the clinician will get the results. Right, so that kind of is a general overview of the test. So being in healthcare, it's very important that you get, you kind of gain the trust of the physicians if you want your tool to be used in the health sector. If it is a diagnostic tool in particular, you want to show that you can trust it. It is not a black box. So that's also important in security. You don't want to have a, I don't know, camera or something in an AI engine or something that detects people are criminal based on just their the color of skin, because the training data has been biased. And because it is a black box, you have no idea if the algorithm is biased or towards which races it is biased. Similarly, in healthcare, you don't want to have an algorithm that gives erroneous results, and the clinician or the patient have no idea if the outcome is reliable. So that kind of makes it important to design AI algorithms that are explainable. Therefore, this concept of explainable AI or traceable AI, where you can, if imagine that I'm a clinician and my patients come taking the test, and if I have two options, one that is an AI engine or a medical device that helps me diagnose the onset of Alzheimer's disease, and it can explain to me why it has come with this decision. Or let's say an algorithm that detects the chances of some sort of brain disorder in an MR image, and can explain why it is giving this recommendation, compared to a black box that just gives an output with a confidence level. So just saying that this person has dementia and I am 90% confident, and you have no idea where that is coming from. So that could be a problem. Therefore, what we have tried to do and have been careful about is to design our algorithms to be explainable. So we can trace back and see what features caused the participant to give this outcome, and we can explain to the clinician, or the device can explain to the clinician why this person is likely to be cognitively impaired. Right, so this is some of the results in comparison to the current standard of care. And so MOCA and ACE are two standard pen and paper tests. They take about 20 to 30 minutes to administer. They are language dependent. So if you go from an English speaking country to another, you have to translate this and collect new normative data to validate the tests. Whereas ICA is a visual test, and there is no language involved. We have actually tested in various populations with totally different cultures and backgrounds, including like the Iranian population compared to the UK population. And we do see a very good generalization of the results. Right, so some of the disadvantages of the current cognitive assessments that we've tried to get rid of is listed here. And you can generalize some of them to other domains if you essentially try to use these new digital technologies and AI in your diagnostic platform. You might have the possibility to take advantage of most of the things I've mentioned here. Most of the AI tools can be self-administered, meaning that it will reduce the clinical time. In this particular example, the clinician or any healthcare professional can explain how the test works in 1 minute or so to the participant, and they are handed over the iPad and they take the test. Well, the test is just 5 minutes as opposed to 20 minutes, and the clinician doesn't have to be there while the test is being taken. The results is then communicated and sent to the clinician. It can be done remotely, therefore, which makes it particularly important and valuable feature during this period of time where people are in quarantine because of COVID. So the ability of remote assessment becomes critical in giving such healthcare services. It's independent of language, as I mentioned, then uses an AI engine, which gives the additional benefits of being able to use big data as they are getting collected. As opposed to the current standard of care, it doesn't matter if you have data from 100 individuals or 100 million individuals, the diagnostic accuracy of the tests, they do not increase because you just have a one-dimensional problem here in things like MoCA I mentioned in the previous slide. It's a test out of 30, and if you score above 26, you're considered healthy, and below that, you're considered cognitively impaired. And this cutoff is defined based on a set of data, previous data, of maybe 200 participants or something. And now if you try to play with that threshold, making it 27 or 25, essentially one way or the other, you're increasing the false positives or the false negatives. You don't have much flexibility because it's a one-dimensional problem. It doesn't benefit from larger data sets. Here, you have a high-dimensional data, and the AI engine can actually benefit from more data. And similar to a physician, it can get more experienced as more patients are seen. It's cost effective for the same reasons I explained in the previous slides. You can get rid of some of the infrastructures that are not needed and get to the core kind of faster. For example, one of the things you don't need here is the expensive time that the clinician need to spend to take the test and then score the test. So that's removed with this platform. It makes it essentially more cost effective for the secondary care to use it. And a few other things, I will not get into the details. So any tool that can help with diagnosing the disease earlier can indeed save lives and dollars. And this is a study done by Alzheimer's Association in 2018. They simulated to see if the diagnosis is made earlier before the onset of severe symptoms that will essentially take away the independence of the patient. If that early and accurate diagnosis could actually save up to 7.9 trillion in medical care costs. That's a huge number, and it can improve the quality of life of that patient by delaying the onset of severe symptoms. Right, so now moving to the second part of my talk, I wanted to, as I mentioned at the beginning, I want to talk about the preventive aspect of those four categories I mentioned. This is one example. OptiMind is a platform, is an app that essentially gives you the ability to track your cognitive performance and gives you personalized insights with regard to your lifestyle. So how it works and how essentially it helps with improving your cognitive health. I typically here give an example of a scale. People who are obsessed with their weight, they go on a scale and they see how much they weigh, and then they perhaps go try different diets, try to exercise, so they become fit. That's for their body. Similarly, if you have a measure of your cognitive health, you can have a way to make your brain, to take care of your brain fitness. And that's essentially what OptiMind is trying to achieve. So it's kind of moving from the passive pathway I mentioned in the previous slides, where a person is having some cognitive difficulties perhaps, and then they come to see a GP or a physician, and then they are referred to a secondary care, to a memory clinic, and then they either have a diagnosis of dementia or not. That's kind of the passive health pathway. Here, what we're trying to achieve is to be proactive. So what OptiMind can do by this personalized tracking of cognitive performance, well, first it can give you recommendations and insights on your lifestyle, so you can improve your lifestyle. That would be preventive. So it will prevent or delay the chances of getting dementia or cognitive impairment. That's kind of the preventive part of it, or preventive side of it. On the other side, it can be predictive. If you have longitudinal data of someone along with their lifestyle, you can detect based on their cognitive trajectory and their lifestyle trajectory, you can highlight if someone is having a cognitive decline before they notice it in their in their daily life, in their daily routines. That's kind of one step moving towards a proactive healthcare, if you like. So similar to the example I gave about the scale, here we can say similarly, you can only improve what you measure. If you don't have any way to measure your cognitive health or cognitive performance, you can't be on top of that. You can't take control of that. So there are some aspects of our lifestyle, or some aspects of our biology that we cannot change, such as age, gender, family history, and genetics. But there are some other aspects, such as lifestyle, that we have control over. And indeed, there was a study last year showing that the people who have genetic risks of developing dementia and people who do not have that genetic background. These two groups were compared against their lifestyle. And the study was suggesting that the lifestyle has a measure impact. Actually, the impact, according to the study, was higher than the genetic background in reducing the risk of developing dementia when you get older. That's quite significant if you think of it as a non-pharmaceutical intervention. So that's kind of what the Optimize is trying to do to improve the lifestyle, such as physical activity, sleep quality, diet, etc., and tell you how your kind of performance is affected when you change those factors. So the core of the test is similar to the ICA, but we have a different AI engine here that tries to relate the lifestyle measures that are being incorporated into that with the participants' kind of performance, and we do find quite personalized insights for each individual. This is, for example, a study with participants who were tracking their kind of performance for about 3 months, along with either their sleep, the exercise, mood, and other things. And here you can see that some individuals, like this one, for example, we had some individuals where they had exercise. That kind of impacted the kind of performance positively. We had individuals when they improved their sleep pattern or changed their sleep pattern, that was the major factor affecting their kind of performance, and so on and so forth. So for each individual, you might find a different pattern. So you might find a different set of activities that mostly affect your kind of performance, which is not necessarily the same for others. And that kind of gives additional insight for them to be on top of their kind of health. And they can see that in their profiles. They can compare the performance with other people in similar demographics. All right, so that's kind of the end, and I hope you've enjoyed this a little bit, and happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Khaligh-Razavi, for your interesting talk. Let me double check if there is any question in the chat room. What is OM? Which you already respond to that. Optimize, right? Can you hear me, Dr. Razavi? Razavi has some problem with his mic. I think what we can do, I asked the questions, so I think you should, if you can, just type it there so everyone can see your answers. All right. So if there is no question, maybe I should ask one question. here's the thing, that the main concern when we're talking about this and want to work in, let's say, healthcare, is that how can we access to the data set? How can we obtain the data set for training our machine learning on it? So is this like a challenge, or is there any like repository for like having all the data that we can like train our model on, or what? Oh, thank you, Dr. Razavi, for joining us.
No worries. Sorry, I thought you need to give me access, but it worked apparently. Okay, cool. So can you ask me the question again?
All right. Yeah. I was thinking, one of the challenges when I'm thinking it's a personal question. When I'm thinking about, let's say, get involved in this healthcare like domain, is that, okay, where can I access to the data set for training a model on it? You know, this data set is always a problem. That, okay,
Yeah,
is there any repository that we can access to train our model on it, or no, it's
right.
just all on us?
That's a very good question, actually. So the healthcare data is typically very expensive and difficult to get access to, and it really depends on what domains let's say you have a product responsible for diagnosing cancer, and then you would need images from the cancerous tissue, and for that you have to collaborate with the relevant labs to give you access to those data. If you want to, I don't know, if you want to, for example, find out what the potential structural damages to your brain structure, then you might want to collaborate with brain imaging institutes. And we have one in Iran, the National Brain Mapping Lab. They already have collected a biobank of brain imaging data. So people interested in that can actually get access to such data. More generally, the concept of having access to clinical data is quite intriguing, and it varies, country by country. For example, in the U.S., and it's currently owned by various entities. The electronic health records are owned typically by hospitals, but there is a problem here because the entities who own the data or have the data, they can sell the data without you knowing who they are selling the data to. And that's a serious issue because it is your body and you're paying for the data. I mean, you have paid for the brain imaging and it is your body. So technically you should own the data. The data ideally should be decentralized. Mm-hmm. So the clinical data, in an ideal scenario, if you want to have a healthcare system where if you've taken a brain imaging today, or you've taken another imaging or a clinical interview or whatever, it's your data and it should be stored with you. Maybe you have an online cloud dedicated to your healthcare data or your family. And anyone who have access to that should consult with you and get access or permission from you particularly. And maybe you are willing to sell that data for research. That's fine. There aren't that many countries that have this model as of today. Some countries, so Estonia, for example, has a system in which the people are owners of their own data. That's a small model. Switzerland, I think, has started to adopt something similar. But in most other countries, that's a serious issue. And the ideal scenario seems to be a decentralized storage of healthcare data, wherein you are the owner of your own data. It can get more complicated in countries with, take UK, for example. The national health system mainly pays for most of your medical records or medical visits or whatever. So it is your body, but they are paying for the data to be collected.
Mhm.
So that becomes more
It's an
complicated.
income, right? Okay.
Right. So that's kind of a complicated issue, but in an ideal scenario, if it is decentralized, anyone can have access to data through the people themselves. In today's scenario, there are cohorts collected for various purposes. For Alzheimer's disease, we have various cohorts, such as ADNI is an American data set. Similar to ADNI, there are counterparts in Japan. It's called ADNI Japan, for example. For MS, there are data available. There is a project in the UK called Radar CNS that collects MS data. So yeah, there are platforms that are dedicated to data sharing for research in particular, and some platforms for commercial purposes, which is mostly you have to pay for.
So these data set that you said, these are like publicly available, right? In the Kaggle or let's say GitHub, right?
Um, no, they're not available on GitHub. Some of the there are various platforms dedicated for this particular purposes. There might be some data available on Kaggle as well. But for example, some of the brain imaging data I mentioned, they are available on a platform called OpenFMRI. So they have
Mm-hmm.
brain imaging data available for research mainly. The ADNI has its own website. Then there is a project called Brain Genomics, if I recall it correctly, that has data, both some behavioral data, some genetics data, and some brain data. It is US population. These data are typically publicly available, but they share it with you on per request. So you have to ask for it through an application. They share the data with you.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask a question here, then I get back to my questions. Here's Mohammed says that is Optimind a mobile app?
It's a mobile platform for personalized tracking of cognition. In its current form, it is a B2B model, meaning that it is not available on the public app store, but we are changing the plan. So I think within the next 2 months, we will make it available on the app store as well. So people who are interested can download, and the first test will be free.
Okay. That's for marketing. What, Mohsen asked that what's raw data Optimind capture from user?
Right. So as I briefly mentioned during the talk, I gave the analogy of comparison to a scale, and you go on a scale on a daily basis to see how much you weigh. You can do similar things with Optimind, but for your brain. So you can take a test that takes about 2 to 5 minutes, depending on which version or mode you select, and then you can have a measure of your cognitive performance. Then it talks to the Apple Health Kit. So, for example, if you're collecting your sleep data or exercise data or your diet or whatever from Apple Health Kit, that data can be shared with Optimind. So Optimind asks for your permission if you want to, for example, see what happens with your cognitive performance when you do an exercise, or when you have a particular sleep pattern. Then you can give access to those data of interest, and then the Optimind does the analysis. Some of the analysis are done locally, and it returns to you some insights, some personalized insights. So you would know, for example, for a person who has this particular pattern of behavior or this particular lifestyle, what is the impact of changes in that lifestyle on your cognitive performance? So does that answer the question? I don't know.
I hope so.
I think so, yeah.
um, Mariam asked that please let me know in the detail about how to detect the people with Alzheimer without any symptom.
Right. So people who do not have any symptoms, that means they might have the underlying pathology of the disease, and that is called the asymptomatic stage of the disease. And by asymptomatic, we mean the current technologies aren't able to detect the changes. So the changes are so subtle that aren't detectable in their behavior with the current techniques, if you like. But they can be detected in their maybe CSF, the cerebral spinal fluid, and definitely in their PET imaging. So if they take a PET imaging of the brain and you want to look for some particular proteins such as tau or amyloid beta, and amyloid beta, so those are precursors of the disease. There are many individuals who might have accumulations of amyloid beta or tau, but they show no symptoms. Uh, it's not possible to detect that on a population-wide basis. So you can't send every individual above 55 for a PET scan. That's too expensive. It's invasive. It's impossible. So there is not enough infrastructure anywhere in the world to send everyone through a PET scan. Not even for a blood test. So even a blood test, you can't scale it to the whole population. What we offer here is a collaboration, or is a kind of shortlisting people for uh, for detection of kind of subtle changes in their cognitive performance, and then they are sent through this screening program to secondary care for a more accurate diagnosis. It kind of saves because in the current platform, in the UK, as an example, what happens is people who do not show any symptoms do not do anything, and there's no screening. People who start to show some symptoms and they start to worry about their developing dementia or Alzheimer's disease, they go to their primary care physician, and they might or might not refer them to the secondary care. And in most of the cases, they refer to the secondary care with around 60-something accuracy. So that means more than 30% are sent inaccurately to the secondary care. And that increases the burden on the secondary care. In the memory clinic, there is typically a large queue of people who are waiting to be visited and for tests to be taken from them. So what we try to do in order to address this problem is we triage them either through sitting in the primary care and referring those who are actually needed to be referred, and preventing the unnecessary referrals. We also sit in the front door of the secondary care to kind of prioritize those who are more urgent, essentially those who are not really urgent or don't have much of cognitive impairment. They can be either referred back to the primary care saying that you're actually healthy, you don't need to go to the memory clinic through these more expensive tests. And those who are more urgent, we call them out, detect them, highlight them. Okay, you actually need to be visited more urgently.
Okay. Also, Mariam also asked the second part of it. Your app can only detect from their lifestyle. I think you answered this, right?
So the app itself is a wellness app. It doesn't give any diagnosis. It is not a diagnostic tool. It is for yourself to track your cognitive performance. And it can be preventive, because when you get insights about how to change your lifestyle in order to have the best possible cognitive performance against your own baseline, then longitudinally that helps you to keep your cognitive performance on a steady basis or even improve that.
Okay. Nassim asked that how can find the relativity between data and the label of the age? Which function
Um,
you which function do you offer?
which question is it?
Nassim, it's on the screen, I guess. Let
Okay,
me.
thank you. How can find the relativity? Oh, MEG and the label of which function do you offer? Um, okay, let me try my best to answer this question. Um, I think the question is asking whether, for example, in a MEG data, uh, how we can predict the age perhaps from the brain imaging data. I'm translating the question as that. Well, we didn't have any MEG data or um, in this presentation. Maybe I showed some EEG data. I don't remember, or it was in another talk. So the EEG data, what we look at is the speed of processing animus information. So how fast you as a young healthy individual can process animal versus non-animal, or your brain can process that. That's in order of about 100 milliseconds to 150 milliseconds after the stimulus answered. Now, in older individuals, that goes above 200 milliseconds. And in older individuals who are not healthy, who have, for example, myocardial impairment, it's delayed by another 20 to 50 milliseconds. That's the kind of pattern we look at in the data. So there is a delay in processing animus information in people with cardiac impairment.
Okay. Yusuf also asked a question about, I think it's related to the serialization process that you said.
Mm-hmm.
That do you have any real experience with federated learning?
With what learning?
Federated learning. I think it's
With
related to deserializing the processing. This is a concept of federated learning.
what explainability measure are reliable? Is that the question? For
Yes.
example, human subjective opinion is still more reliable, and we have a federated learning. I actually don't know what is federated learning. The decentralized idea I mentioned, it is about this data storage. It's not about learning. So the data is not stored in one hospital, for example. It is decentralized and stored either locally for each individual or on a cloud. That's a different thing.
Actually,
But
okay. May I add something here? This
yeah,
the concept of federated learning is similar to deserialization, and that's what's happening here.
okay,
Basically, data remain in the client's storage, like devices,
okay, I see.
and there is a server that basically each client do the process in their own devices and send everything to the server, and server like do like a conclusion based on the all this data that's coming
Okay,
from the client.
that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. So if that's the explanation, then Optimine platform is working exactly like that. And for any other platform that is giving you personalized insights, it's only looking at your data. So it doesn't have to, um, for example, in a classification problem, what happens is you want to accumulate the data and compare that with the population. But if you don't want to give any comparison against the population and it is just your data against yourself, or maybe against some pre-extracted information, then you can have actually localized data, and the data is only communicated with the cloud when you want to get the insights. And following terms and conditions, the you can make sure that the data is only stored on your local machine, or you have access to that data. That's kind of that's possible, and some platforms work like that, but there aren't that many that follow uh, this strategy.
All
In
right.
terms of the explainability measure, human subjective opinion is still more reliable. Well, these are two different issues. The explainability or traceability of the AI is a different topic compared to the subjective opinion of human beings. And some of you might have read the book by Daniel Kahneman, talking about the slow thinking and kind of fast thinking. So the slow thinking is your reasoning when you wanna, as an example, let's say I go to the physician. The physician studies the symptoms I have, talks to me and tries to understand what is happening here, and then goes back to his, medical book or whatever, tries to, step by step, find out what are the symptoms, what are causing these symptoms potentially. That's kind of a slow thinking process. So it's referring to the knowledge he has, and dissecting the problem step by step. Alternatively, what he could have done, if I'm coughing and the previous patient who has come to his room had cold or influenza, he would, because that's on top of his mind currently, he would diagnose me with influenza, for example, without actually dissecting the problem step by step. That's intuitive thinking or fast thinking process. So the subjective opinion, if you're referring to the fast thinking process, it is not reliable necessarily, and is only looking at what is currently available in your mindset. That partly maybe answers your question. I don't know how we're doing with time. Yeah.
All right. Ramin asked, "How have you ever tried to discover drug via AI to improve people cognitive performance instead of making a mobile app?"
That's a difficult question.
Different.
So, no, we have not. That's the short answer. The the full answer is that drug discovery, drug development is a totally different venture, and it takes quite a different infrastructure to be able to do drug development. What people have done in this area, kind of bridging between being a pharmaceutical and being a small AI company or something. There are companies such as AI Vivo, and if you search, there are some other emerging companies in the AI sector that offer drug discovery, let's call it AI-driven drug discovery. And what they do is they try to find out from the currently available drugs and their and how they work. They try to find out from a list of 1 million or 10,000 potential drugs for a particular disease. They shortlist 50 of them or something that is practically possible to run a clinical trial on. That's kind of what the AI-driven drug discovery does. So they try to reduce the cost of drug development. Instead of running clinical trials on 1,000 potential drugs, which is hugely expensive and practically impossible, you try to narrow down the list to most probable drugs that are likely to work in that particular population.
All right, thank you. And Faiza asked that how this app is going to get the data from user. Is there another AI things like smartwatches for recording the data of the users?
Yeah, it relies on whatever user is willing to share. For example, some people have only mobile phones, and when that mobile phone is in their pocket, that counts your steps. and that is communicating their health kit. If they have an iPhone, for example, in the Apple Health Kit. So that's one type of data. Some people track their sleep via smartwatch or via just the manual entry of the sleep data. And of course, each of these have different qualities. We do not collect that data. We essentially incorporate that data from whatever tools they are already using to collect that data. So we do not have a particular smartwatch that we give the participants to use for collecting that data. We give them advice. For example, if you have an Apple Watch, uh, we suggest to them to wear it, for example, during sleep or during exercise to make sure the heart rate is captured, the exercise hours is captured, the sleep pattern is captured. If they have something more accurate, such as Muse platform for tracking their sleep, then that takes priority. So I think that
All right.
kind of answers the question. Yeah.
Bobak asked that, do you use online learning? And if so, how do you use user data? Do you save a copy of user data on your server or just train the model on a user device and return the learning parameters?
That's a good question. So different countries, after there has been issues around privacy, but legitimately, and the briefly I touched upon the decentralized data storage. There are concerns about healthcare data, security data, and these are quite sensitive data indeed. What we do in the UK, there is a regulation called GDPR for essentially there are a set of rules recently defined that everyone who has some sort of interaction with users has to follow these rules of this GDPR rule or be GDPR compliant. And briefly, what it says is you are not allowed um, to have access to a store or have access or to sell the identifiable data of the participants. Under some circumstances, you can collect the de-identified data, meaning that we remove anything that has, that makes it clear this is data for example, Bobak. We make it de-identifiable, and that data can be used for research. What we do particularly is on the in the ICA platform, we do not have access to any of that data. It is stored locally on the depending on the client, it's stored locally on the, for example, if it's in the memory clinic or it's a GP or whatever. They collect that data, and that data is stored in their EHR, electronic health report. So that's for the clinical purposes. For the Optimine app, which is a wellness app on the communicating with the user directly, in the B2B model, it is the data is collected and owned by the company who is purchasing the app, and it is stored locally on the mobile platform of the clients, and it is analyzed on the cloud. So that kind of gives the answer, I guess. Yeah. It's complicated at the end. I can't hear you, Ali. Are you on mute? Um, Maybe it's me. I can't hear you. Can others hear Eddie, or is it only me? So Ali, do you want to talk now? Maybe it's better. Okay. Maybe while Ali is figuring out the, I'll see if there are any more questions. Okay, we have your voice now.
Oh, thanks, God. Okay, so I think I asked all of the question here. So I have a just 101 level question because, like I said, for this kind of healthcare, because I never been into this topic, I was thinking that how much expertise level needed to be get involved in this field. I mean, we know some learning algorithms and what are the machine learning algorithms to like doing some classification, cat versus dog, right? But when it comes to this like health, it seems that there should be some more expertise in that domain involved in this. Like, how is that? Am I right or no? It would be okay for me to just start.
Absolutely. So healthcare is, I mean, it has several stakeholders. That makes it very complicated to get in. If you want to have real world impact, if if you just want to develop something that is then used for a publication, that's not difficult. Um, you download perhaps some data and train some classifiers, and then get some area under curve, record it, and you get it published. That's the easiest part. Now, if you want to translate that into a real world application, that's the very difficult and challenging part. At the same time, it's super exciting. There are so many opportunities in healthcare. I briefly mentioned at the beginning, because of the difficulties and regulations in healthcare, and given that there are many stakeholders, for example, you have hospitals, you have clinicians, you have the insurance companies, you have smaller entities, you have government regulations such as FDA or CE, and then you have to deal with the tech side and try to connect um, the engineers with this side of the world, the clinicians. Even within the engineering team, there are different levels of understanding for the engineering part and the data science part. And these two, there's an emerging role called data engineers. Maybe it's not emerging, but so it is kind of trying to link the data scientists with the engineers. That's the trying to,
Yeah.
so the engineers try to make that solution that you have implemented on your laptop, try to make it scalable so everyone can have it on their mobile phone. So there are all these different nodes and this in this complicated ecosystem. At the same time, it is super exciting in comparison to other, because you see the real impact of what you have worked on. And you see that it is actually changing people's lives. It's improving their life. So I would say it is easier to stay and be resilient in healthcare. At the same time, it is difficult to get in.
Mm-hmm.
But I
That's
would certainly encourage people to get involved. There are serious issues in healthcare in Iran and elsewhere. And AI and technology in general gives a great advantage to, for example, you can skip some of the infrastructures needed to deliver high quality healthcare to remote areas. As long as you just provide them with internet and some smartphones, they can get access to high quality health services without actually having the very expensive infrastructure of having a modern hospital or something.
Before this session, we have another talk, Dr. Sadeghi. Yeah, I think that Dr. Mariam Sadeghi, that they also had work on this dermatology and AI stuff. And one of the concerns that she had was this ethnics and what was that? Ethnics and bias in the data. Is it the same similar thing that you faced during the developing of your app?
So that the biases in the data calls for the explainability. So I had a slide where I emphasize why is it important to have AI engines that are fully explainable and traceable, particularly in the healthcare and in security, where you're dealing with serious issues. It is not just, it is not a mobile app for fun that is trying to mimic how you would look like if you're 10 years older or something. It's a serious scenario, and you really want to know how the AI is coming to that decision if you're a physician, for example. So that's why what I see at least in the next 10 years is that all the applications, or the majority of applications of AI in healthcare has to be in conjunction with clinicians. So it would be aid for diagnosis or aid for treatment, or as an aid to a radiologist to make the treatment or diagnosis. The biases in the data can actually have serious impacts. I don't remember if I gave the example of GP3 in the talk. This natural language processing algorithm that developed by OpenAI. For example, if you go, it's available on, if you Google it, you can find it. So you start with a few sentences, and then it generates a story based on the sentences you started. And it's very fun to play with, and it very much, in most cases, looks that it's a human that is writing that story. So while it has tried to be unbiased, but that's reasonably impossible, because most of the media it has consumed as its training data is biased. As an example, what you can try, if you try entering some Middle Eastern names, or names with a alif lam at the beginning, into your one sentence story, it will come up with some horrifying stories of terror bombing and whatever. It's very unlikely it doesn't give you such a story. That's a very clear bias. And imagine such a thing is being used in security, then anyone with such names is going to be highlighted as someone with high risk of
Sure.
committing some crimes. Similarly, in healthcare, if you have a image processing algorithm that is for cancer diagnosis of skin, and you have only tested on people with white skin or white color, it is going to have serious errors when being applied in larger population on people with other colors, color of skin. So that's why, at least as an interim step, the two actions should be taken. More emphasis should be made on making the AI algorithms explainable and traceable, so you know how the AI is coming up with this decision. And we have tried to do that for the clinical application. We have the ICA, Integrated Assessment Platform. We have equipped that with an explainable AI, so the clinician knows based on what features it's coming with that decision. And then it is clinician's call to make the diagnosis. The app itself is aid for diagnosis. That tries to minimize these potential biases in the data. And of course, if it is used more and more the bigger the data, the more accurate it can become.
Mm-hmm. We have the question: does your mobile app available in Iran?
It will be in the next 2 months or so.
Next 2 months. Free trial, you said?
Yes, yeah.
So I think we don't have that much time left, and I don't want to take up your time. So I have like last questions. That's my question, honestly. Um, from like a hardware side, right? These applications, these algorithms need to run in like platform, right? So I know for a fact that these like neural network algorithms are like computationally extensive, right? So for like just releasing some products that would be standalone, right? So it need to be some hardware design in order to do it like faster and in low power mode. Is there any concern in these topics that you face with?
So the limitations we're facing because of the hardware, that's kind of the question, right?
Yeah, from the hardware like designer, like architecture, like hardware architecture. Do you have come with this problem that you need to design an architecture that do this algorithm faster in low power, low energy? Because these devices that do like healthcare, like a smartwatch, right? A smartwatch has a battery inside of it, right?
Mhm.
So it has a limited energy. If this algorithm want to run in the smartwatch, it will be, consume all the batteries
Yeah.
real quick. So this kind of problem, have you ever faced or think about to?
So with the pace that the tech in the health industry is moving, there hasn't really been serious issues on that side. It is more the other way around. The technology, well, as of now, is more advanced than the pace of adoption in healthcare, in the health sector. Um, and the smartphone itself nowadays is it's quite impressive in terms of the performance. Many things you can do locally, and those you can't really do locally, you can do on the cloud, and then communicate the outcome with the mobile platform. So maybe one factor that would certainly benefit from improvement is the life of the battery.
Okay. All right. That would it for this session. I really liked your presentation, and learned a lot. And I think your like contact are shared with the attendees. So if they have any more questions, they can contact you through email or LinkedIn. Other
Yeah.
than that, if you have any comments or something to share for last a minute, so
No, my pleasure. It was my pleasure, and thanks for the interesting questions.
yeah, sure.
I enjoyed it.
So have a great day, I guess. Bye.
Thank you. Sure.
Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.